Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Zara.
I'm Sam.
Earlier this week, independent Senator Lidia Thorpe disrupted a ceremony for the King and Queen, yelling for nearly a minute about the King being a genocidalist, calling for land to be returned to First Nations communities and asking for a treaty. In the days since, Thorpe has been accused of breaching the Pledge of Allegiance she took when she entered Parliament. Only, Lidia Thorpe doesn't think that's the case, because she's claiming a bit of wordplay meant that she didn't actually make the pledge. On Monday, independent Senator Lidia Thorpe disrupted a ceremony honouring King Charles and Queen Camilla. There, she accused the King of genocide and mass murder. Here's a clip of what occurred at that ceremony.
You committed genocide against our people. Give us our land back. Give us what you stole from us. Our bones, our skulls, our babies, our people. You destroyed our land.
All right, so Zara, there's a lot in this story. I want to start by first going through with you a little bit more as to who Lidia Thorpe is, because she's the central character here. We know the King. Let's talk about her.
Okay, so Lidia Thorpe is a Gunai Gunditjmara and Djab Wurrung woman. She's been a senator for Victoria since 2020 and she won her seat at the 2022 election, becoming the first Aboriginal person to represent Victoria in Parliament. She was elected as a member of the Australian Greens, but then last year, Lidia Thorpe resigned from the Greens and moved to the crossbench. And you might remember that was over disagreements about the Greens' position on the voice to Parliament. If you don't remember, a bit of a quick refresher. At the time, Lidia Thorpe said that she wanted to represent the grassroots Black sovereign movement, and she said that she couldn't do that with the Greens. And that's because the Greens were supportive of the voice to Parliament. They essentially came to this position that they would support it, that they would vote yes, whereas Lidia Thorpe ended up in the no camp. And that was because she believed there needed to be a treaty with First Nations people before a voice. And so she ended up, over the course of that campaign, being one of the most vocal advocates against a voice to Parliament. But her opposition to it really came from this progressive roots rather than the conservative roots that we saw, for example, from the Coalition. But apart from the voice, you might have read headlines about Lidia Thorpe before, mostly because of her activism and the form that takes. So we saw the senator physically block a Mardi Gras float that was to protest police attendance. And we also saw her attempt to take the stage at an anti-trans rally, but she was then knocked down by police and not allowed to get on stage. I do want to just finish, I guess, this wrap-up of Lidia Thorpe by saying the one thing that is really consistent in Lidia Thorpe's advocacy is that she is really out there pushing for a treaty with First Nations people. And also, I guess, very much connected to that, she's always advocating to end the disproportionate incarceration rates and the deaths in custody of Indigenous people in this country. And that is a thread that has remained throughout all of her political career and indeed her career before politics.
And that was also central to what she was saying when she interrupted the King's ceremony.
Exactly. So you would have heard in that clip earlier that I played that Lidia Thorpe mentioned a few different things. She was speaking for more than a minute, I believe it was, before the police escorted her out. But one of the things that she made clear both in that speech and in all the interviews she's done since is that she wants the country to have a discussion about a treaty.
Right.
You know, we as a country have had conversations about having a republic or moving to a republic, which would mean we would leave the Commonwealth and we would become a sovereign nation.
With our own head of state.
Exactly, and without the king and without the royal family. And she's been really strong in saying, no, before we have that conversation, we need to have a conversation about treaty. I will also add that Thorpe said she had requested a private meeting with the king, but that request had been ignored.
So we have this moment when the King is in Canberra and Lidia Thorpe interrupts him. What's the reaction been to Thorpe's actions?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, as you would expect, fairly split. I guess I'll take it in two parts. I might just begin with those who have supported her first. And I'll just run through, I guess, a few different perspectives here. So the first is from Vanessa Turnbull-Roberts. She's a lawyer and the ACT's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children and Young People Commissioner. I'll quote directly from Vanessa, who said, "What Senator Thorpe is demanding is what mob are demanding. Treaties are necessary to recognise historic wrongs and provide an opportunity to look at the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people." Then we had Celeste Little, who is an Aboriginal trade unionist. She wrote a piece for The Guardian where she said, and I quote, "Resistance to colonisation has rarely been polite. The senator asked questions that Aboriginal people are still waiting after 2 centuries to get answers to." And then I guess a different perspective here is of Craig Foster. He was the chair of the Republic movement until fairly recently when he resigned. But he had the same sentiment here. He said, "We often hear demands for respect, but respect must be reciprocal. Acknowledging history and allowing the healing process to occur is the beginning of genuine respect based in truth."
So those are some of the perspectives of people who were supporting Thorpe's actions.
Yeah.
There's also been another side to this. What's
Yeah.
the opposition been?
Yeah, so on the flip side of this, Lidia Thorpe's been accused of violating her pledged allegiance to the Queen, and there have also been these growing calls for her to resign.
So the pledge being what parliamentarians say when they start their term.
Yeah, so let's just jump into that a bit because, I mean, it'd be understandable if you haven't watched parliamentarians make their pledge, but essentially when, as you said, a parliamentarian is first sworn into Parliament, they take this pledge of allegiance. And I'm going to just read you out the pledge that Lidia Thorpe would have made back in 2022 when she was first pledging allegiance and first entering that role. It says, and I'm quoting directly here, "I," and then your full name,
Sam Koslowski,
"do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors according to law, so help me God."
Right.
Now, of course, when Lidia Thorpe was first asked to make this pledge back in 2022, Queen Elizabeth was still alive and she was the head of the monarchy. But when Thorpe was first asked to do this, she said, and I'll quote here, "I bear true allegiance to the colonising Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II."
I remember this. It was quite a striking moment.
It went viral. Yeah, exactly. And so Lidia Thorpe was asked to start again and to do her allegiance again. And everybody thought that she had finished that allegiance, that she had said it, and we all moved on. But as I said, now she's been accused of breaching that allegiance because she's being accused of not being faithful to the Queen's successors and heirs, which is, of course, King Charles. However, now this story takes another turn. Lidia Thorpe has since come out and said she actually isn't undermining the pledge because she never actually made it. She's saying that she didn't properly execute it because instead of pledging allegiance to the Queen's heirs, she instead pledged allegiance to the Queen's hairs.
Wow.
Here is Lidia Thorpe herself speaking to the ABC earlier this week.
I swore allegiance to the Queen's hairs. If you listen close enough, it wasn't her heirs, it was her hairs that I was giving my allegiance to, and now that, they're no longer here, I don't know where that stands.
What an interesting turn of events in what is already an interesting story.
Yeah.
There's literally going to be a hair in it or a syllable in this one. What's the response been to Lidia Thorpe coming out and saying that second time actually didn't do it properly either?
Well, the opposition in particular, I'd say, has been the one leading the charge with this sort of criticism of Lidia Thorpe. According to Simon Birmingham, who is the coalition's Senate leader, the coalition's now considering legal opinions about what really happens next here. Earlier this week, he said it was a deeply serious claim to be making that does bring her, he's again talking about Thorpe's, eligibility to participate in the proceedings of the Senate into question. And then from the government's perspective, Katie Gallagher, who's the manager of Senate business for the Labor Party, of course, told the ABC, "We need to find a way to make sure that the institution of the Senate and the important role that it plays in democracy is upheld and respected." She added that she thought that at times that's been challenged by the behaviour of Lidia Thorpe.
Okay, so what happens from here?
I mean, I don't think anyone really knows. I don't know of a precedent of this sort of thing happening, but Thorpe herself has doubled down. She's by no means backing away from her comments or from this Pledge of Allegiance topic itself. She said she's not looking to be re-elected, but that she's just looking to get justice for her people. It's important to note she's not up for re-election until 2028, so she's not actually at any risk of losing her seat.
Right.
Until then, of course, anything could happen, but she's not part of a party. She's already defected. She's already sitting on the crossbench. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens from here with Lidia Thorpe.
Thanks so much for that, Zara. It's a really interesting story with a lot of legal ambiguity as well, which I think is a whole other kind of aspect we all need to get schooled on is what does a pledge actually mean? And Is it breaking the law, or is it just breaking a rule of Parliament? I'm sure that discussion will all play out in the public arena over the coming weeks. And thank you for joining us on the Daily Aus this morning. It's been another huge week of news. I think that this week has been really interesting with the King and Queen in town, and we've been having a lot of very interesting discussions as a nation. So thank you for having them with us. If you enjoyed what you heard, or you're watching us on YouTube and you like what you saw, I'd love if you could follow, subscribe, leave a comment, send it to a friend. Any of these small movements that you can take really does help us as a media company. We'll be back tomorrow with your Saturday Good News edition of the Daily Aus, and then back to normal episodes on Monday. Have a great end to the week. We'll speak to you then.